Trevor Sikkema, the now engaged Trevor Sikkema, joins us now on 104.5 The Zone. Hello, friend.
I appreciate that, Buck. You know, it's funny that you say fiance because on my very first podcast episode since coming back from the vacation in which we got engaged, I referenced her as my girlfriend. So I did I failed on the first test of remembering that it's fiance now, and so I'm saying that, and so I'm trying to hammer it into my head to make sure I get that repetition. So this definitely helps. So
don't worry. Yeah, there's going to be plenty more people other than me to hammer it into your head. All these different things that you're going to go through. It's incredible. I'm very happy for you, buddy. Congratulations, truly. And that podcast, by the way, is the NFL Stock Exchange. It's available wherever you get your podcast. Trevor and Connor Rogers do a tremendous job. Subscribe, rate, and review. So I didn't realize that you were doing a giant YouTube show before you were on the radio with us today, but it's timely because you guys were talking about reasons for optimism for all 32 NFL teams, which can be found at the Pro Football Focus YouTube channel. If you would like to check that out. Why should Titans fans be optimistic, Trevor?
Well, you know, something that we talked about when we just got off that show, and Steve Palazzolo brought this up. Mike Vrabel is getting into the Mike Tomlin category of, like, you might just have to believe in this guy no matter what the roster looks like, no matter what the outlook is, if they lost more players than they added, whatever, because you look at him as 4 years as head coach, 9-7, an 11-win season, then a 12-win season last year to be the number one overall seed in the AFC. And so, man, if you look at this season with the Titans and you go, okay, you're losing A.J. Brown. That's not great, right? Objectively, it's not a good roster move there. I know they tried to substitute it by bringing Treylon Burks in, but even if you believe as much as you do in Treylon Burks, that's going to be a tough year one substitution, swap in and out there for a guy as talented as A.J. Brown. But if they can still make it happen, like if they still win that division, make the playoffs, man, Mike Vrabel is building for himself quite the head coaching resume. And so that was a big reason. You know, Derrick Henry is still on the team. If he's healthy, I think that they can certainly have the identity and the mental fortitude to go up against any team in the NFL. And so certainly on that side of the ball, you'd love that. But then I also looked at the defensive side of things for the Titans as a big reason to be optimistic because you look at Jeffrey Simmons and how he took just an ascension into now establishing himself as a top 5 interior defensive lineman in the NFL. Obviously, Harold Landry signs the contract, and you love what he could bring as a pass rusher. I think they still need a little bit more production out of the rest of that group up in the front seven, but you look at that secondary. Kevin Byard's already established as a fantastic player. Amani Hooker has been playing really well lately. And when you look at their corners, Caleb Farley, Elijah Molden, Christian Fulton, you throw Roger McCreary now into the mix, those are really talented football players. Those are some of the best secondary players that we've seen in college football over the last couple of years. You get those guys fully healthy. I know that's a big if at this point for some of them, but if you get those guys fully healthy and they're all playing together, Buck, all of a sudden on paper, that looks like one of the more talented full secondaries in the NFL. So they're young, but they're coming along. And I think when you look at reasons to be optimistic about the Titans, you got to love what Mike Vrabel has been doing. Derrick Henry is still there in the identity and offense. And it looks like that defense is just getting better, and this might be the best year yet for that group.
At Tampa Bay, Trey is where you can follow him. You can read all of his great work at PFF.com. Most recently, the top players under the age of 25, ranking the top 25 players under the age of 25. I'll go ahead and give them this one spoiler, Trevor, that you have Jeffrey Simmons at 8. And you bring up that defense just generally, where really the only question that we have heading into OTAs and soon enough minicamp and training camp is that outside corner spot. Who's going to play? Who's going to fill in where Jack Rabbit Jenkins started last year? And I think in a perfect world, it would be Caleb Farley, but there are still a significant amount of questions there as to his readiness. But Jeff, what they got out of him last year, because not just of his superior talent, but because of the amount of games that they were able to play up front once they got Bud Dupree up and running in the second half of the season. Harold had some other talent that was not Vic Beasley or Jadeveon Clowney to take some attention away from him and allow him to be a more singularly effective pass rusher. But honestly, the best addition that they had last year was Danico Autry because of the amount of versatility that it gave him. The ability to get pressure with 4, it's as important, I would argue, in this AFC as all of the different quarterbacks that changed teams this year, given the fact that the Titans specifically, play the AFC West as an entire division in 2022.
Yeah, certainly. And you again, you like that group. I think on paper you really like that group a lot. When you look at PFF grades, Denico Autry had the top pass rush grade of his career, right almost around 70 on our grading system, which is a pass rusher, is pretty dang good. And I think that certainly when you look at him and you think, all right, he's a new addition, but you're getting the most out of him, that's really, really important because you already had Bud Dupree, who was taking up a big chunk of change with his contract, and you already had Harold Landry, who you thought was going to be that good pass rusher for you, who was ascending as well. It does all start with Jeffrey Simmons, though. I remember when I was scouting him coming out of Mississippi State, man, I think I had him top 5 overall prospect for sure. He might have been number 3 for me. He's just crazy good, man. It's just unbelievable. The size,
it's just stupid.
It is. No, it really is. It's unbelievable what he can do. And there's certain games last year where we just saw him absolutely take over the way that very few interior defensive linemen can do. I hate bringing up Aaron Donald against anybody, and not about to bring it up here, but when you look at his name, you look at Chris Jones, you look at what Quinnen Williams was when he was at Alabama, right? These just game-wrecking interior defensive linemen. That feels like the path in which Jeffrey Simmons is going, where up front, that kind of disruption that you get right at the middle, whether it's going up against a center or an offensive guard, when you can create that disruption in the middle of the pocket, the closest point from A to B straight to the quarterback, if you will, that's paramount, especially when you've got guys like Autry and Harold Landry on the outside who you think can clean things up for you and get those one-on-ones on the outside. It all starts up front. It all starts with Jeffrey Simmons, the way that he has been able to ascend, stay healthy, and be an even better contributor this past year. It should give Titans fans a lot of faith moving forward. That defensive line is going to be as good as it needs to be to, again, like I said, hopefully that secondary unit, especially the corners, are healthy, because if they are, this could be a really scary, good, talented defense. There's some ifs involved. But, man, on paper, I'm looking at this depth chart right now. If it fills out the way that it's supposed to here, it's a really good unit for the Tennessee Titans.
Trevor Sikkema of Pro Football Focus, our guest here on 104.5 The Zone. We've spent a lot of time, given the fact that we talked to Todd Downing, the offensive coordinator, yesterday, talking about where they can get more creative, Trevor, how they can, do things like not score more, or score more rather than 16 points in a playoff loss to the Cincinnati Bengals, when that tremendous defensive front gets 9 sacks of Joe Burrow and they still get bounced because they played their style of football, and it's not adept at keeping pace with what the rest of the AFC has. If you are looking for them to evolve in any one way as an offense this year, what would that specifically be?
Well, it's tough, right? Because you look at Treylon Burks and you would say, okay, his versatility, right? The kind of uniqueness that he brings to that offense is a way that they should be able to get the ball in his hands very well. Even as a rookie, he could be able to step in right away, get carries as well as targets. And so I think that creativity is important for them. But when you look at it from the standpoint of they're subbing him in and out for A.J. Brown, it's hard to say that that's like a net positive. And so, I like the Robert Woods addition a lot, right? I like Treylon Burks a decent amount, although I do think it's going to be a little bit of a slow burn for him to get where he needs to be. But when you're taking A.J. Brown away, and I get that Julio Jones was not as healthy as they wanted him to be, but when you look at this unit and it's not Julio Jones and it's not A.J. Brown on paper and in theory, and instead it's Treylon Burks and Robert Woods, how much better did you really get, even with availability being more on your side? I'm not so sure. So it's hard to see areas where they might get a little bit more creative, but there's no doubt that they have to be, because I think the reason why a lot of people have doubted the Tennessee Titans isn't because they have a good running back, right? It's not just that. It's not just the fact that their best player is a running back and not somebody who immediately impacts the passing game in a direct manner. It's the thought that the Tennessee Titans do a really great job of making you play their pace. They do a great job of dictating football games, both with how they play defense and then, of course, how they control the ball on offense with rushing the ball, not being as volatile and having 3 straight pass plays, 3 straight incompletions, and all of a sudden you're punting it to the other team. They're a lot more controlled and paced than that. But when you get into those shootouts, and there are too many good quarterbacks in the AFC now. You look at Josh Allen, you look at Patrick Mahomes, you look at Joe Burrow, you look at Russell Wilson now, right? So many good quarterbacks, Justin Herbert, I could go on and on. There are so many good quarterbacks in that conference that you are eventually going to get to the point where you've got to switch up what you do. You're going to get hit in the mouth, if you will. You're going to get pushed off of your pace. And somehow, some way, the Titans have to be better at adjusting to all of that, adjusting to being able to, I don't want to say abandon the run, but get more into the passing game, get more into those receiving options to just be able to score quicker and more explosively. That is something that they're going to have to do and figure out how to do with who they have as their playmakers this upcoming year.